Senator Roberts.
For the last 30 years, Australia has been hostage to the supposedly green movement's great climate fraud, designed to create an all-purpose excuse to do whatever the government wants, an excuse that's reusable, recyclable, fungible, not only for the government's benefit, for the benefit of their donors, stakeholders, bureaucrats and associated carpetbaggers. Bill Gates, BlackRock's Larry Fink. We know who these people are from watching the meetings Prime Minister Albanese has and refuses to explain. Nothing says I'm doing dodgy deals behind the Australian people's back, like refusing to publish detailed records of what was said and agreed in these meetings. This evening I'll examine the green climate fraud and make a major One Nation policy announcement. So let's start with the war on farming. The climate scam seeks to replace fresh, healthy, field-grown Australian produce from family farms with fake foods created in near-urban intensive production facilities. Synthetic meat-like products cultured in bioreactors in a process that mimics the way cancer cells grow, with just enough artificial nutrients added to pass as food. Fake meat from plants remains on life support. 18 ingredients now, including cocoa, and they still can't make people eat it. Billionaires can't make money out of conventional farming. They can make money, they think, out of industrial food. Who owns vegetarian meat supplier Beyond Meat? Surprise, surprise. Predatory global wealth funds, BlackRock, Vanguard and State Street lead their share registry. Both the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and University of California, Davis have found the environmental footprint of these frankenfoods are worse than naturally grown pasture-raised beef. Bill Gates has declared cattle an existential threat because of their methane farts. Rubbish! Cattle have been on this earth for 2 million years. Leading methane producer India domesticated cattle 9,000 years ago, and nothing's changed. Another leading methane producer, the United States, had bison for 150,000 years. 300 years ago, there were 50 million bison, buffalo. Now they're gone. The USA's 28 million cows are suddenly causing fartageddon. There's no science to justify this nonsense. As University of California, Davis explains, quote, after about 12 years, the methane from cattle is converted into carbon dioxide through hydroxyl oxidation. That carbon is the same carbon that was in the air prior to being consumed by an animal. It's recycled carbon. End of quote. Cows don't harm the environment. The methane cycle they perpetuate has been with us for 2 million years, at times in greater quantities than now. Plants are more powerful than scientists admit. A recent finding from the US government's Oak Ridge National Laboratory found, quote, scientists were wrong. Plants absorb 31% more carbon dioxide than previously thought. End of quote. Climate scammers refuse to talk about the role of forests and crops, especially hemp, in sequestering carbon. Australia is already carbon neutral. Already. Our forests and crops sequester much more carbon than Australia produces. So let's stop chopping down trees for industrial wind and solar, access roads and transmission lines. We can stay that way. Next, the lie. Global boiling will kill us. Fact check. It's false. Between 1998 and 2023, global temperature variation oscillated between minus 0.4 degrees and 0.6 degrees as carbon dioxide, CO2 levels in Earth's air rose from 0.036% to 0.042%. Then the Tonga eruption occurred and temperatures rose by 0.7 degrees centigrade. More. I'll share a link on this topic when I post this speech on my website. It includes some excellent GIFs of the fraudulent data tampering and fake temperature stations that have occurred, that have concocted warming where none exists. Japanese data, which is not tampered with, shows no warming in the last 50 years. Next, carbon dioxide levels do not drive temperature. CO2 levels are a result of temperature changes. There's been a lot of obfuscation on this aspect of climate fraud. I urge anyone who actually believes nature's trace gas can change the world's temperatures to look more closely and more carefully. The seasonal variation in atmospheric CO2 correlates very well with the temperature, not with human production of carbon dioxide. CO2 does not drive temperature. Temperature variation drives CO2 levels. It's the reverse of what the UN is claiming. Global temperature itself is a product of atmospheric pressure, albedo, cloud cover and many other factors. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the UNIPCC, computer models downplay these factors, especially cyclical variation in solar radiation, which the UN assumes to be minor as compared to changes in CO2. Unvalidated UNIPCC climate models replace the most powerful modes of heat transfer, conduction, convection, latent heat of evaporation and condensation, with just radiation. In other words, UNIPCC climate models are rigged to blame CO2 because the real factors are minimised in the construction of these models. No wonder these fake models have already been proven comprehensively wrong. The next lie, the Great Barrier Reef is dying. Great Barrier Reef coral cover was the highest on record in 2024. The reef is healthy, yet the scare stories continue. Every time the green scammers claim the Great Barrier Reef losing coral to scare you, the phones start ringing in North Queensland with tourists cancelling their bookings. Tour operators and the communities they support suffer. Staff lose their shifts, their livelihoods, businesses close. All for a political lie, a fraud. The reef covers 344,000 square kilometres. That's 5 times the area of Tasmania. There will always be an area on the reef where an unusually low tide on a hot day causes localised bleaching with still winds. That damage repairs naturally and quickly, as it has for 14,000 years. There will always be a flood dumping fresh water onto the reef and killing the saltwater coral polyps. It's happening right now in far north Queensland, so stay tuned for scare stories about coral bleaching blamed on climate change when the cause will actually be these floods. Just in time for the election. The next lie, sea levels are rising. Since the end of the mini ice age, 200 years ago, ocean levels have risen a tiny amount. In 1914, the mean sea level at Fort Denison in Sydney Harbour was 1.11 metres. In 2014, 100 years later, it was 1.12 metres. 1 centimetre, 10 millimetres, natural variation. The next lie, polar ice is melting. In Antarctica, there will always be an area of unusual warming associated with underground volcanoes and hot springs, of which the Earth has thousands. Pressure builds up, they let off heat, melt the ice above, and then go dormant again. John Kerry predicted in 2009 that, quote, in 5 years, scientists predict we will have the first ice-free Arctic summer. End of quote. Didn't happen. Along with the other failed scares, the Arctic ice cap floats and moves with naturally varying wind and current direction. In fact, after 40 years of unprecedented man-made global boiling, there's more Antarctic sea ice now than there was 40 years ago. It's time to acquit carbon dioxide. The great climate scam is about submitting to the world's predatory billionaires, delivering up our agriculture, transport, energy, manufacturing and industrial base, and food and property rights, in the name of saving the planet. In reality, it's just greed. Less for you, more for them, and it's control. One Nation saw through this scam in 1996, and we've opposed the agenda ever since. We have opposed the $200 billion spent so far, wasted so far, on net zero measures. Bloomberg now put the cost of completing Australia's transition to net zero, including electrification of cars, homes and appliances, at $1.9 trillion. $1.9 trillion. A terrifying figure. The few $100 billion spent so far have added so much to our electricity costs, the bills are going up double or triple. The pain is only just starting. The lie that solar and wind are cheaper because the wind and sun is free is not supported with evidence. To the contrary, the more solar and wind added to the grid, the dearer our electricity becomes. The reason is simple. While the wind and sun themselves are free, wind turbines, solar panels, backup batteries, 15,000 kilometres of extra transmission lines and access roads are very expensive to make, transport, install and maintain. While a modern coal or nuclear power plant lasts 60 years, solar panels, wind turbines and backup batteries only last 15. $1.9 trillion will only get us to 2050, following which every 15 years solar and wind will need to be replaced at a cost of hundreds of billions more. Enough of this madness, this fraud. If elected, One Nation will abolish the Federal Department of Climate Change, all their related agencies and programs, including all net zero measures and mandates. This will return $30 billion a year to the Treasury, forming part of One Nation's pledge to reduce $80 billion in government spending in their first term. More importantly, it will return billions of dollars a year into the pockets of homeowners and businesses, making everything you buy cheaper, more affordable. That's how to solve the cost of living crisis. It's time to end the net zero scam. One Nation will end the net zero scam.
Thank you.